Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be changing the color of plastic using Rit Dye. And you have to use the synthetic brand. If you don't have the bottle that looks like this or the packaging, it must say synthetic on the packaging. Otherwise, the color's not going to take or absorb into the plastic. Let's get started. So for a while now, I've been seeing others change colors on their figures entirely using Rit Dye, and I had to try it for myself. Now, as you saw in the clips earlier, this was the blue Beetle. And yes, the torso is from Dead Man. Now, everything you see in blue is because it was painted, so the dye does not affect the paint, or it just changes it to a dirty color. But as far as the plastic, anything that is not painted will truly change color. And as you see here, the light blue changes black really well. Now you can leave it in just a couple of minutes or maybe even an hour in hot water. But in my case, I've got a lot of other projects going. So I left this in the hot water in a thermal insulated container, and I left it there for 4 days. After 4 days, it looks like this. Incredibly well, color changed. There's no sanding or painting, no grinding, no fitting. It looks amazing. But let's not stop there. Let's go on to the next figure. So if you missed out on that exclusive Robin coming from McFarlane, well, you can still make your own Robin using one of the Carrie Kellys, because that's what McFarlane did. He just swapped out the head and a few accessories. And you can do that yourself and end up with one of these custom Robins for yourself. Now, I was able to purchase one of the exclusive Robins from McFarlane, but it still isn't the Robin that I wanted to see, the one from Batman the Animated Series. Let's take a look. So using the same Carrie Kelly body, I just took the pieces that I wanted to change color on. And I took the shoulder pieces, the gloves, the boots, and changed them black. Now, in red is the legs. Because they are a light tone of plastic, they take the color really well. Of course, I did have to heat it up. These took color that much quicker because they are a lighter tone of plastic. So it took me maybe an hour to change the color in that red dye. And it turned out really, really well. There's no longer any need to do any painting unless you truly want to color match something or you want to erase some of those blemishes that are from that swirling and twirling on that plastic. Now, the knees are a different plastic, and it does take the dye, well, it takes it differently. It does tone them darker. So if you want an exact color match on the reds, you're still going to have to paint. And that's the thing that you're going to find on these plastic figures. Not all of the plastic take the dye the same way. Different plastics can take the dye or absorb it very differently, some more than others. But in this case, I don't have to do any sanding anymore. I don't have to paint the pegs. It's already done in the dye. Look how clean this looks. But let me show you how I did that with some different plastics. Now you are going to have to go to your stove and turn it on and heat up some water. Now this is not a cooking channel, so I can't give you a true recipe of how to do this because each plastic takes or absorbs the ink or dye much differently than the others. In this little soup mix, I've got some resin, I've got some plastic. And I personally want to see how each one of these materials takes the dye better than the other. Okay, so I left them in the dye for longer than an hour, actually 12 hours. But let me show you the results. Not all of the plastics absorb the dye the same way. For example, these red boots, they're still somewhat red. They're a darker red, but they're not black. Now the resin takes dye really well. Look at those fists. They're black. But look at the Joker hand. It used to be white. It's just a dirty gray. It works. I can still paint it black. But it's not what I intended it to have. I wanted it to be totally black. That yellow pin, boom, it's black. Look at that hand. It looks great. And that purple boot, here's the green lantern shoe. That turned out black, so did the other one. And that purple boot, as I mentioned, that shoe looks really good. Now if you see this, I forgot to turn it up and dye the inside of the hinge, but I can do that later. So let's take a look at the bad side of dyeing plastic. And one of the questions that's going to come up is, well, what are the negative sides of dyeing plastic? Well, one of them is that the plastic does not absorb the dye all the way through to the core. It's only on the surface, so maybe even the first millimeter of plastic has the dye absorption, and the rest of the plastic is the original color. Let me show you. If you take a look at the feet, they did have the pixie boots. I cut off and ground down that pixie boot shape on the end, and I was left with the green plastic once again. Now I'm not going to put this back into the dye because it's going to take that much longer to complete the project. I'm just going to paint it. And a little spot like this is not an issue. Very, very insignificant. However, the other issue that can be significant is the next. Look under the arm. That tunic has not been treated or painted. However, the black part is. That is black dye, and that used to be green. But because I installed it in place and, I moved the joints around, the dye transferred onto the red. There's no way getting it out. You're going to have to paint over it. Even acetone is not going to get it out. It's done. So the next question to answer is, how do you get around the dye transfer? Well, you seal the finished work and the work that's not been worked on. That way there's no transfer. There's a barrier between the two surfaces. Even after you finish painting, you'll have to seal your work again. And by the way, those boots, that's a shrink tube. That's not paint. And that concludes this episode on changing color with Rit Dye. I hope that you learned something today. I hope that the video answered some of the questions that you may have had, and certainly answers some of my questions because nobody would answer them for me. So I had to figure it out for myself. Now, if you did like the video, give it a comment, give it a like. Any questions, leave them in that comment section. And of course, keep customizing those figures. We'll see you here next time.